And we welcome back in Jamey Eisenberg as we recap another wild week in the NFL, including at the quarterback position. It's been a roller coaster almost. We saw guys step in and blow us away and follow up with streaks of rough outings. We've seen journeymen step in and lead their teams to back-to-back wins. But what have you made out of the quarterback position as we sit in week 14?
It's ugly right now, and especially when you hear the news about Justin Herbert and then we see C.J. Stroud go down. We know those have been two basically must-start quarterbacks. Basically, Stroud has been his entire rookie campaign this season, and Herbert, while he's had his up and downs, he's still been in most people's lineup. And now you may not have Herbert for who knows how long. Stroud in the concussion protocol, so we'll see what happens. We don't know if Geno Smith is going to come back after being out this game. And Joshua Dobbs, who's been a sort of a little bit of a fantasy savior of late, getting benched for Nick Mullins. So you look at the leaderboards and you see Bailey Zappi, you see Jake Browning, you see Desmond Ridder at the top of the list, ahead of guys like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. It's just been a very strange season, very strange week 14. And now as we enter the fantasy playoffs, who can you trust? Well, we'll have to tell you that during the week because it's going to be very interesting in the rankings for the quarterback position. Trust
is such a good point when you're talking about a lot of these signal callers, but also the running back position as well. Year two guys, week 14 featured several sophomore ball carriers having big outings, including Breece Hall, James Cook, and Rachaad White. But what stood out to you this week, and how do fantasy managers assess them moving forward?
Yeah, I think for Rachaad White, it's kind of just been a very steady second half of the season. He kind of took off really after the first quarter of the year, little struggles to start the season, but he's just been excellent. So there's really nothing you do with him aside from just start him week in, week out. James Cook, I think, has sort of established himself as the same type of player lately. Since Joe Brady took over as the play caller, it's now been 3 excellent fantasy outings for him. And while he's still sharing a little bit too much for me with Latavius Murray and even Ty Johnson, you're seeing his role in the passing game explode. You saw what he was able to do today against the Chiefs. He was the best offensive player for the Bills. He's outperforming Stephon Diggs. He's doing more than even Josh Allen is at this point. And so it's been fun to watch his sort of career blossom in his second season, especially over the last 3 games with Joe Brady calling the plays. For Breece Hall, it's been a struggle for the last month. But Zach Wilson came back, and what we saw a little bit with Tim Boyle and Trevor Siemian carried over to Zach Wilson. And really, it's just the smart thing to do for the Jets. Feature Garrett Wilson, feature Breece Hall in the passing game. And that was something that was sort of missing from Breece Hall. So if he can continue to do this, they got a tough matchup against the Dolphins heading in to week 15. But I love his involvement catching the ball out of the backfield. So while the running game still may struggle, and he was much better today against the Texans, but the run game has certainly been struggling for the Jets. But if he's going to catch the ball like this, you may have 3 certainly must-start guys, which is what we kind of thought for most of them coming into the season. They're fulfilling that prophecy now as we get to the fantasy playoff.
All right. Well, we talked a few weeks back about how the emergence of Puka Nacua would impact Cooper Kupp's productivity. And he hadn't topped 50 yards over his last 6 games. But last week 14, Kupp putting up 115 yards on 8 receptions and finding the end zone. And the Rams lost to the Ravens. But how do we analyze how to use Kupp moving forward?
Yeah, I think it started last week when he scored the touchdown in week 13, and then it carried over to today when Puka Nacua was still fine. I think we had a lot of concerns coming into the week about the weather in Baltimore and certainly the defense in Baltimore. But let's give Matthew Stafford some credit. He's just been awesome over the last 3 weeks, and that kind of lends itself to where these receivers are right now. So if he's going to continue to lean on Kupp, which is what we thought was going to be the case all season long, then you have a must-start wide receiver. And let's get to week 15 when we get the Washington Commanders. That secondary is abysmal. And so I think we're going to be very happy about Kupp, very happy about Puka Nacua, and certainly very happy about Matt Stafford, who's becoming a must-start fantasy quarterback. Go back to how we started this with some of the quarterback concerns that we have. Stafford is making a lot of people happy right now and probably going to make a lot of people some money in their fantasy leagues. In terms of Cooper Kupp, top 10 wide receiver in week 15.
There we go. That's the nugget we're looking for. If you have any of those key players right there, make sure you hold on to them week 15. All right. I feel like the tight end position has been a little bit up and down this season. There really hasn't been that consistent tight end like we've seen in past years, like outside of Laporta or maybe Hawkinson. But Evan Ingram and David Njoku would like to have a word in week 14. Njoku, 91 yards, 2 tutties. Ingram, similar numbers, 95 yards, found the end zone twice. How do we assess these two going forward?
I think they're must-start tight ends. And you look into Njoku, thankfully Joe Flacco is going to be the starter for the Browns for the remainder of the season after what Kevin Stefanski said today. And that just gives them a safer passer. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, I think, is eventually going to make some plays in his career. But right now, Joe Flacco just a little bit more sound for what the Browns need and certainly a better, more polished passer at this point. So that will eventually help Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore. But Njoku's just been very solid over the majority of the season, and you see what the upside could be. For Evan Ingram, you lose Christian Kirk now. He missed the majority of the last 2 games. And what have we seen? Ingram step up as a star. And that's what he's kind of drafted to be this season, to be one of the top-tier fantasy tight ends. And he's starting to play that way. So thankfully, Trevor Lawrence, healthy, dealing with the ankle injury, coming through this game. Hopefully okay, no issues. Going to play next week against Baltimore. Tough matchup, but they gave up a touchdown to a tight end for the Rams this week. So that bodes well for Evan Ingram. But as long as right now Christian Kirk is not coming back, not going to play the majority of the regular season, may come back in the playoffs, this is going to be a go-to guy in terms of Ingram for Trevor Lawrence. So both guys are going to be top 10 and potentially top 5 tight ends to close the season.